Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. From the IGP team meeting last fall, people expressed an interest in learning more about the variety of tools that are under the umbrella of AI. And this is the first learning opportunity we've organized of FY27. Given the number of people who RSVP'd, I think the interest extends far beyond just the kind of core IGP team, and many people have questions about this technology. Noting that we also have the Uplift AI Roadshow session next week with the organization's enterprise AI team, with more of a focus on the Copilot tools that we all have access to. This session is intended to be kind of a bigger picture exploration of what's possible. It's not anything that we're already necessarily planning or a prescribed direction. And please remember that the IT and innovation pages on OneSource include a section on AI at the Red Cross with policy docs and governance procedures. So please, if you're planning to roll out a new AI tool, check there first to make sure you're in compliance. There's a process for getting any new software and use cases approved. Today with us, we have Emil. Emil's worked with us with his Sonata Learning Group to develop several packages of learning materials, recently including for cache information management and digital surge. He's very much embedded in the humanitarian space, great at making complex topics approachable, and has been digging deep into how various AI tools can be used for teams like ours. So I'm excited that he's here today to present. Over to you, Emil.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for making time out today. So yeah, so I guess today's session, we're just asking how AI can help with the Red Crescent's mission. The title was for simulation training and whatnot. We will cover those topics a bit, but it's really going to answer a lot of the points that were raised in some of the previous workshops and surveys. And so people were interested in how can we use it for training and support? How can we use it for reporting and coordination? And how can we use it to empower, national societies? And so today's session, we're going to look at three big ideas at a high level. Then we're going to open it up to Q&A. We're going to move quickly. And we're going to, normally I like to do a lot of live demos. We're going to do mostly videos and screenshots just for, time. But rest assured, everything you're being shown is real. And this is going to be less about how to, because we can spend a lot of time on the granular, how to specifically do something in Copilot Studio, and that's very important. But this is going to be more about what's possible. So you can kind of have conversations about the goals and what we'd like to achieve, and then the implementation can come later. And I guess before getting into it, one general disclaimer, there are many forms of AI, and I'm sure anyone here who does, anything related to, data analysis, would say, yeah, we've been using AI for a decade, to do things like weather modeling. And we're not talking about that type. We're talking about generative AI, the more complete chatbot type, applications that can, process natural language and create responses. So that's the type we're talking about today. And so I guess if you want to raise a virtual hand, and how many folks would say they've never used, and this is entirely confidential. How many folks would say they've never used AI, generative AI, for anything work related? So you need to raise a hand or say something in the chat. All right. And I guess the next one is you've used it, but you were unimpressed. So go ahead and raise a hand or speak in the chat. Yeah. I talked to a former boss of mine, and her company is completely AI automated, and she said as an employee she would give it meets expectations or needs improvement. But yeah, and some say you find some AI tools useful but don't think they fundamentally change how you work. All right, cool. That's where a lot of folks are at. And then how many of you couldn't possibly imagine working without AI anymore? All right, so cool. So, all right, cool. So I guess we got a range of experiences, and so let me get back on my other screen here. And so yeah, so I mean, if you look at the media, there's this hype about, oh, AI is going to change everything. It's going to destroy the economy. It's going to transform the economy. None of us are going to have jobs. None of us will ever have to work again. And it seems like, so huge. But then sometimes when you unplug from the media and look around, it's just kind of like, oh, okay, where's all this transformation? And maybe one of the biggest barriers to organizations actually seeing meaningful change is we often ask, what can we do with AI? Okay, well, here's the thing. What can we do with it? When really maybe a more productive question is, what do we need done? Can AI do it? And what does AI need in order to do it? So I guess the first question, what do we need done? Having worked with many humanitarian development organizations, you're not going to find too many mission-driven nonprofits who will say they have more than enough staff and bandwidth for everything it needs doing. Can we use it for training? Can we use it for technical assistance, planning, decision support, collecting and analyzing data, proposal writing, translating into different languages? I mean, these are areas of almost universal need across the sector and pretty much everywhere. So, okay, so if these are the general buckets of what we need done, can AI do it? So I guess maybe it would help to give like the world's shortest technical synopsis of what AI actually does. But let's maybe start simpler. So what's unique about AI? If you want to be really reductive, generative AI is a talking computer. And I don't know, not talking in the sense of like a talking children's toy that says a couple of phrases. More like in the talking sense of a robot out of science fiction that you can actually have a conversation with, and that can actually help you out sometimes. So, and the way this works is to say AI models talk is a little bit of misleading, because really what happens is we take input, we take the things we type, we tape any documents we attach to it, any database records we feed to it, and then the AI model is going to like scan it, and it's going to look for patterns. And it's also going to, account, and so it's going to take those patterns and it's going to match them to other patterns, that are embedded in its memory. And those patterns are hard coded at the time the model was released. AI doesn't actually learn anything new unless you tell it. And then you can also give it some standing instructions. And then the way it would see patterns is like if you had said, Usain Bolt ran to the store to get some golden delicious apples, it's going to look for all possible arrangements of words that might commonly occur together. So its first guess might be Usain Bolt ran gold. Are we talking about the Olympics? And it might say 71%, this is about the Olympics. Ran to the store, apples. 89%, this is about shopping. Bolt store gold. This is about locking gold bars in a safe. 12%, security. So that's the kind of thing it does, and it does it by, comparing the arrangements of words to all the other patterns it's scanned. And now this might seem really theoretical. It's going to matter for practical reasons later. And so once it does that, it makes its best guess as to what should come next, and that's how it generates, a reply to your question or an edit to your document, or how it tags all your records in your database. And so, but what does it need to do that successfully? Well, we said that's what it's doing, but the problem is it needs clean data, because if it's referring to like, some outdated information or some inaccurate information, it's gonna draw the wrong connections and it's gonna give you corrupted results. Also, it's constantly weighing how much should it prioritize what the user enters versus the patterns that are hard coded into its memory versus the instructions it's given. So it's constantly making a judgment, and based on that, that's what matters. So we have to be making sure we're feeding it the right information. But let's say once we have that all set up, let's say we did it properly. Well, okay, once we have our AI factory, our response factory, what can we do with it, right? So this gets us to our first kind of big idea here. And we're going to use a use case that's near and dear to me because I come from workforce training. And so we'll talk a little bit about simulation training. You know, whether you're doing something that's like a tabletop or you're doing something in the field. I mean, I know the Red Cross Red Crescent movement, you know, is a big proponent of this. So am I. I guess if we can have a virtual show of hands, how many of you have done a full-blown simulation exercise in the field in the past 6 months? Cool. All right, got a few. How many have done at least a tabletop exercise? Okay, got a few more. And then that's great. And then how many folks have done at least a role play in a workshop? All right, cool. Sweet. All right, and that's about right. And so the thing is, simulation training works. I could go get all the research for you, but I think we all know that. And it's highly effective. But the problem is it's really labor and resource intensive. You have to design the scenarios. If it involves data, you got to create anonymized or synthetic data. If it's going to be in the field, there's the logistics of getting everyone together, or even just getting people together in a conference room. Someone's got to facilitate it, and then you got to, you know, assess people's performance. And now, but fortunately, these days we now have talking computers. So how does that help us with simulation? Well, you could use AI tools to help design a traditional simulation, you know, like, oh God, it's like 9 years ago, we did a big simulation exercise for one of the big financial consulting firms, and we were training their new hires, and we were training them specifically on healthcare finances. And initially, the consulting firm, they wanted to do, hey, we want to simulate a rural hospital and an urban hospital and a freestanding, you know, hospital that's not part of the health system. But you know, we had 1 month to put all the data together, and eventually we said, look, there's no way we're going to be able to create all the fake budgets for every department in 3 different hospitals and all the fake reports and the characters. Pick one hospital and do it. You know, so it was just the sheer amount of design time. But with AI, like any other type of knowledge work, we can accelerate that design. So, for instance, now this is not traditional, but in one of our AI role plays, we made a demo for a hotel chain of like a customer service role play where, you know, you talk to a customer and they have a complaint at a hotel front desk. And then at this very same time, we actually had another demo for one of the big national coffee chains, not Starbucks, but one of the other ones. And so we were able to take essentially the same scenario, and we wrote, okay, you're still a customer coming to the front desk, but now you're in a coffee shop. There's different rules for what the manager can do. So same mechanics. But then what happened is then we got an opportunity to pitch something to an airline. And on a lark, I just fed all the background information and rules we created for the coffee shop and the hotel, and told the AI models, hey, can you create the equivalent inputs for an airline flight desk? And amazingly it did, and amazingly it worked. And I say amazingly because, you know, AI is an awesome coding tool. It usually, I mean, it saves a ton of time, but it rarely nails it on the first attempt. But in this case, it did. So we just gave it, hey, here's an example of this and that, and it just generated an entire scenario saying, okay, here's the things you're allowed to do as a ticket manager. You know, here's the types of problems customers have, and then, you know, it works fine. So it can create scenario content, but it can also facilitate scenarios, which is pretty cool. And so you know, we have one here, which is, I think this will probably be one of the few live demos I attempt here. But you know, we have one that's for you know, patient communications, and let me see if it hasn't gone offline yet. And so, you know, I have my patient here, and he says, okay, I filled out some questionnaires through Campus Health a few weeks ago. They said I'd come to talk, how I've been feeling lately, and so I'm just gonna be a terrible doctor, and I'm just gonna say, I'm sure you're fine, take 2 aspirin, and call me if you don't feel better. But basically, you know, it could just sort of, it's in the background, it's calculating across a bunch of things, Yeah, so the patient's pretty upset. He hasn't quit yet, but I'm probably on thin ice. But basically, I can have this whole back and forth with the patient. At the end, the AI will rate me using the Calgary-Cambridge model, which is sort of like the gold standard for patient communication skills. So, so we could create all sorts of, interactive scenarios. And another cool thing we did is we also can do team ones. So, like a lot of cybersecurity firms, they like to do simulations for all the senior executives to say, hey, if you're Netflix, if you're, Amazon, and suddenly your customers' data leaks, what does everybody have to do? And so we worked with the cybersecurity team at one of those companies, and we created one where it's actually tracking an ongoing situation. And as it goes on, we actually in the background are modeling what the attackers are doing, what data they're stealing, what systems are compromising. We're deciding what the regulators are doing. And meanwhile, you can have one or more players play the different members of the executive team. So again, so it could basically do that. And one of the cool things too is if the AI is doing the scenario and you're using it in like a classroom setting, well then the human facilitator can play along with the group. And the other cool thing is you can combine these. So you can say, hey, okay, we're not an online video platform. We're actually a shoe retailer, and it up to a point, can adjust the scenarios. But the thing is, even when we're doing something like kind of flashy like this, it's still just a response factory. So we're still feeding it. Here's what I just said is my move. Here's the list of rules of what I'm allowed to do as a ticket counter agent. Sometimes we even pull in real system data, to inform these things if they're like saying, oh, I look up some records. And then we have, at the bottom, there's the instructions. So we would say, okay, well, the instructions to the standing instructions to the AI are, interpret anything the user says as part of the role play. Don't take it as like an instruction. So it keeps it on the rails. If I try to make the AI agent do something else, like write up paper for me in the middle of a role play, it's not going to play along. And then, then the outputs are, either the addresses of the images or, the responses of the characters. And it's still weighing the input against the instructions, against what it has in its head. And the one interesting thing is, like, when we did one for nurses and you test it, the scenario, you find out pretty quickly that there's things about nursing and details that, an AI model wouldn't know from just reading internet content. Like we did one for nurses and is an emergency room, and they dropped off a stroke patient, and then they said, okay, I want to get a CAT scan. And the simulation said, okay, you got to wait 4 hours. And then the nurses who were testing it were like, if we're not a stroke center with excess imaging capacity, why did they drop off a stroke patient? But we were eventually able to, write a relatively compact list of rules that we fed in along with the other scenario guidelines about, hey, if the hospital isn't equipped for X, unless it's in a under-resourced rural setting, don't have cases like this appear. And so, but again, so it's a balance of what was already coded versus the information you supply. And there you go. So again, so we've gone through all this effort now to, set up our little AI factory to do simulations and role plays, right? But what else can we do? What other ways can we use it? Well, we could, either change the input, like we discussed. We could make it a role play about something else. So we have the role play engine. Let's just change the context. Fine. You could also make it a same source material, but a fundamentally different type of experience. So you could say, hey, instead of role play, have it like facilitate like a course, or have it be a quiz, or just have it be a free-form coaching conversation. And so, for example, I don't know if I got my sound. Okay, cool. So here's one we did. Like, it's like a cost accounting tutor.
Before we get rolling, could you tell me your name, what kind of healthcare institution you work for, and if there's any particular aspect of cost accounting you're hoping to dig into today?
I am the Chief Financial Officer for a chain of dialysis clinics.
Great to meet you. Dialysis clinics. Now there's a world where every penny and every minute counts.
So,
As CFO,
so in this
before
case,
we get
it's
rolling, could you
so in that particular case, it was, it could tailor the lesson to give examples that would be dialysis specific. And we could also, instead of asking the user, we could have a standing user profile. So whether they're doing a simulation or whether they're doing an assessment or whether they're doing a lesson, it already knows what their position is. So those are the ways we can sort of use the same mechanics we set up to deliver different learning experiences. But then the other cool thing is, if you've built a simulation, you can build a coach. And the thing is like, well, what's a simulation doing? It's presenting a situation to the user. The user says what they would do, and then the robot, evaluates them against some kind of rubric, right? Well, you could take that all the knowledge sources you've set up, and you could change the logic. So now the user presents a situation to the robot. The robot gives a recommendation based on the same guidelines that we'll be using to assess people in a quiz. And then the user can reply and maybe ask for follow-up questions or give clarifying information. So again, you have the factory, but you don't have to think in silos, and you can even get more extreme. Like in one case, we built for a factory, and as a steel mill in a sub-Saharan African country. And basically their biggest challenge was, people show up and they claim that they can repair a certain type of machine and you're not 100% sure. So at first they said, hey, can you just make like an assessment for us to assess people's skills? And we're like, sure. So here's what we initially made.
Maintenance Technician Skills Assessment. In this assessment, you will need to explain how you would diagnose and resolve
This sound's no longer coming through now, at least for me.
Emil, I think you might be muted. Might have hit the mute button.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so the screen share sound's not coming through. Okay, that's fine. So the point is here is it's asking a scenario-based question about what would you do, if the number 2 roller on a machine was broken, and then basically from there the person can give an answer, and then I just say, hey, they might be over greasing the bearings, and then it can give me an evaluation of my response. So fine, but then after we did that, and this was to assess job candidates whether they actually knew how to repair certain types of machines, the company said, well, can you just make a assistant that people could use on the job, that would actually help them repair machines? And so we created another app, which is the Preventive Maintenance Copilot, and it was using the same data sources that I was using to generate the assessment scenarios, like all the equipment manuals, all the SOPs, only now it could actually integrate with the company's maintenance management system and pull down like, okay, well, hey, you're employee number 114. Here's the checklist you're supposed to go through today. Is everything all right? And then it would basically force the user to, and this will be important in a moment, not just go through a checklist, but also leave notes about what they did. And then eventually, one step beyond that, the client said, after we had that system in place, the client said, hey, could the machine, just on a scheduled basis each night, read sensor data and help us with preventive maintenance? And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, you already set up the connections to all these, systems of record. Sure, and so what happened is it started as just like a learning application. It became an actual operational execution copilot, and then becoming this semi-autonomous system, just because we were just looking at it as jobs that needed to be done. Preventive maintenance, they had some specific issues with the quality of preventive maintenance they wanted to address. And again, one source of data, many different applications. So that's the first big idea. Like, so it might be fine. Like, we do want to solve specific problems. So you might want to say, I just want an AI thing for this. I just want an AI agent for that. But we should probably be thinking of larger systems and how we can leverage, the same sources of knowledge, the same integrations in multiple ways. And then that raises the question of like, okay, but what actual solutions do we use? And that's a case-by-case basis. Sometimes you can just get a general purpose chatbot, like regular old Copilot, and just teach people, hey, here's a good way to phrase a question. Maybe you tell them, hey, you can use this little quickie agent we made that can reference a certain PDF. And so for some applications, that's enough. In other ones, you might want to, get maybe a lot of the tools you use, like CRMs and whatnot, have AI features in them. And so you might want to say, well, if our CRM already has, AI features to help you do analyses of contacts, do we really need to integrate it with Microsoft 365 or not? And we've helped clients migrate in both directions, like either saying, no, we want like our Google or Microsoft platform to be the center, versus no, let's keep it all compartmentalized in our accounting app or whatever. So the second one would be, purpose-built apps. And then finally, you can also use like more sophisticated agent builders in your enterprise platform to build like partly or wholly autonomous agents. So it's just really considerations when building those are sort of like, well, when's it appropriate to just tell people just use Copilot and ask it questions freeform? Well, that's highly flexible, but in case we want, consistent outputs or consistent answers, that might not be the most consistent way to do it. When do you want to use like a more transactional type app? We're like, okay, well, this is a thing for doing a certain type of review, and it has 4 steps in the workflow, and you can't change the workflow. Well, that's where consistency outweighs the benefits of creativity. But of course, if you build something like that and it doesn't meet people's needs, well, then they're going to say it's restrictive, and they'll probably end up using, their own AI accounts on their phone. And then of course, you could build AI agents inside your enterprise platform, like Microsoft 365, and that's super cool because that's where your data already lives. But again, you have to be careful about what access you give it, because if it's like, even if someone has, if you give Microsoft Copilot Studio agent, access to, all your files and folders, if you aren't being attentive to making sure that those files and folders are well organized, up to date, and clean, it's not just going to reference the official one that you want it to use. It's also going to reference your discarded drafts. It's going to reference your policies from 5 years ago. And just asking it to just know what's the latest and greatest. Remember, it doesn't really read, it just draws all these connected dot patterns. It doesn't exactly see text the way we do. So you just gotta be careful. Now, the thing is, if you're using Copilot Studio, you can get really granular about like what data sources it can access. But again, this becomes like a sort of SharePoint administrative task for somebody to make sure that, okay, if we set up an AI agent that's specifically meant to give questions about X, answer questions about X, is it pointed to the right set of documents? Are those up to date? Again, it's not magic, but still, just because it's not magic doesn't mean it's not highly useful. So yeah, and so I guess if we do another like sort of quick poll here, who here has used Copilot or another AI chatbot for work in the past month? All right. Cool, almost everybody. And I guess you could pull your hand down. Have you used an app with built-in AI features and actually used those features? Have you actually taken a suggestion from the Microsoft Word sidebar, or let your QuickBooks do the tagging of your expenses? All right. And then I guess if we want to reset one last time, how many folks have actually built an agent or workflow to execute like a more complex multi-step task? All right, so Pam, and all right, so it seems some folks are getting out ahead, and that's actually a great number. Cool. Yeah, and so again, we and so we could have a whole session on how to use specifically Copilot or how to design a role play simulation for training. But right now we kind of want to stick on the theme of, okay, well, what all is possible? So even beyond what we just discussed, once we have our AI factory set up, what else can it do? And so that comes to our second big idea here, which is, so far we've been kind of treating AI, agents and systems as sort of like information vending machines. I mean, you ask it a question, you get a response. You tell it to do something, it does it. And it's very much left to right, beginning, middle, input, process, output, right? But to show what else it can do, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is assessment in training. So, and now this might seem a bit pedantic, but why do we do assessment? Like, why do we bother having people run around, either during a training exercise or having managers do assessments?
Better design of activities.
Yep. So, cool. Well, I mean, in theory, the purpose of assessment is to either measure readiness if it's in training, how will someone perform in the field, or to measure performance. How did someone perform in the field? Past tense. And in theory, if we're assessing accurately, we can sort of intervene, have someone do additional training, have a manager talk to them, or reward them. And anyone who's in the learning department will recognize, the 4 levels. And ideally, you could tie training activities to performance on the job to actual results for the organization. But the problem is, what does our actual training data learning data look like? Usually it's like a dashboard like this. Oh, 10 people finished the course. They got 30% on the quiz, or 90%. They spent a total of 8 minutes, so, okay, but that doesn't really directly translate, into the kind of things that a manager would care about. And even the quote unquote more rich data formats, okay, maybe you could say on the 3rd question, they answered B. Okay, that's still asking us to draw a lot of indirect connections between our assessment methods and the actual performance. Though, if we're doing like a quiz, like the one we showed earlier with the the factory candidates, you can have it give a free response, a natural language prompt. They can give a natural language answer, and then it can actually create an actual assessment that skips the intermediate metrics. I mean, you can still capture metrics, but this is actually an anonymized real result. Where it's saying, hey, this is a food handling safety quiz. It was for a manager, and it said, well, the manager does seem to make food safety a priority. They're good problem solvers. They're excellent communicators to their staff, but they don't actually seem to know what the laws are. And they never mention that they need to do more training, and they never bring up the topic of documentation. Okay, suddenly, we've skipped all the intermediate steps, and it's actually giving us a actionable insight into people's performance. So no more of that. We could just get the answers. And and again, we can also, if we're using like those assistants that are working with systems of record, we can also like say, hey, summarize all the maintenance notes. Let me know if there's any one machine that seems to be having problems this month. And then also, you could also have it flag. And so here we had this system actually flag whenever anyone noted a serious problem but did not mention any concrete steps to fix it. And so you can either assess like an individual's performance, you can assess a cohort's performance, in aggregate, you can assess an individual over time, or an entire cohort over time. And we've done those kind of things. And so here's an example of like a cohort review. And so it's like, hey, generally, this is like how financial advisors are doing with getting new clients. And it found some, for the management, found that like, well, most of them don't feel comfortable, hitting up their personal contacts to become customers of the wealth management firm. Okay, so that's actual insights a manager can use. And the other cool thing though is you can also flag, it can also specifically look at individuals and pick them out of the crowd. And sometimes it's for support. So like, it's like we said before, that one we mentioned for the factory, if someone didn't have a coherent plan to fix something, it would send an email to management. We've also done things for like social services, where if like a client using an app expressed depression or suicidal ideation, it could actually flag, a psychologist. And we've also had ones where it catches people being good. So we did a app for banks who distribute like climate finance money to businesses throughout the world. And the problem is a lot of the bankers don't necessarily understand technology. And then so we had them complete like an e-learning course on climate finance basics, but then we gave them access to a tutor that could answer their questions and actually support them with designing
Climate
programs.
finance.
And we actually had multiple occasions where someone just working at a front line at a branch bank in Guatemala or in Mongolia actually came up with some good ideas for marketing, solar technology or other clean technologies. And we were actually able to, have it notice that, and out of thousands of people, send a wire all the way back to the technical team in Switzerland, who could then go out and say, hey, we saw you're trying to create like a prepackaged loan for farmers to get solar power. How can we help? And so they had a very small, they had like 18, technical assistance people to support tens of thousands of bankers. But with the AI tools, they're actually able to have visibility into what's happening. And so that's kind of it. AI can do more than just provide information to the user. It can also report back to the organization. Now, granted, this probably on one hand sounds great because, if Big Brother's watching you and cares, that's nice, but other folks might be uncomfortable. And so you really need to set some rules. So, we actually had, worked out with clients strict rules for like managers couldn't actually see verbatim transcripts in some cases, though they would be available for audit purposes. And we always made sure that anyone using the app was apprised of its reporting obligations. Like the ones we did for social services kind of had analogous reporting obligations to what a human practitioner might have, in terms of if someone said that like, oh, I got in a fight with my mother and pushed her down the stairs. Well, okay, I'm required to report that. But the machine we would have a standard statement it would make up front. And the other problem too is though, managers could become over-reliant, just saying, okay, well, the machine said this about somebody, so I'm going to believe it. And of course, there's practical considerations if you're working in some environments. We have a whole nother session about limited bandwidth connectivity environments. But that said, these are solvable problems. And so that kind of gets us to the next point is like, there is sort of a emphasis in a lot of there's sort of an emphasis in a lot of conversation around AI about the risks, about protection. And now a lot of people were asking about, hey, how could this help? How could this help, national societies around the world? Well, a lot of resource constrained, national societies would obviously benefit from, tools that could accelerate things like documentation work because they have even less time to spare on administrative tasks. Also, it can get over the whole having to wait a full day to get an answer from an expert on another continent. And also, we mentioned, as long as it's not surveillance, having that visibility helps deliver targeted, timely technical assistance versus someone making the rounds of live workshops and not making it back for a year. And also, of course, we can get into languages. Actually, the thing, all the steel mill ones, those actually deliver in Portuguese. I had to flip a switch to have it speak English. So it's pretty cool, how you do that. And I guess the one case I would make is, we do here in the United States, we do work with social service agencies, and the average social service agency, even if they quintupled their staff, if they hired 4 times more, as many social workers, they'd still barely be keeping up with the queue. And by offering tools that first helped social workers automate some of their administrative tasks, we're able to reclaim a good portion of their time for actual service delivery, such that if the average agency had 4 people use the tools, they could basically add the equivalent of a 5th full-time team member, for just a few $100s a month. And also, we're able to do things like, by having people who are like looking for jobs, be able to talk about them with AI counselors. We were actually able to, when people were having struggles, we're able to escalate those to humans quickly, and we actually had some counselors say, hey, from the few interactions I was able to have with this person, and from what they did in some of the online learning and the workshops, I would not have had any idea that they were struggling with X. So the last I want to lead with is yes, there are risks. There are governance issues and ethical issues, but there's also a positive ethical case for using AI, across an organization, both to improve service delivery to the people we're serving, and to, make, and to help different parts of an organization that might not be equitably resourced, close the gap. And so, yes, there is always, everyone says, well, won't they just start replacing humans with AI? Look, there's always a risk that if a tool comes like this, people use it as an excuse to cost cut, but I'm sure the Red Cross, Red Crescent is in the same position as those social service agencies, where even if you quintupled the workforce, it would still be a shortage. So so I guess I'll stop lecturing, because we definitely want to get some QA. Obviously, I mentioned some of them. There's a lot of themes we did not discuss. A lot of the technical stuff, from ensuring accuracy to data security to how you actually build these things. Happy to set up, follow-up sessions if there's a topic a particular team wants to deep dive into, or if people want to get hands-on. But I guess with that, I guess we can, let me see here, open up to Q&A.